One. Nice. Welcome, everybody, to episode 2 of the Lizzi and LeLe show. Is it Lizzi and LeLe, or is it LeLe and Lizzi? Which name are we going to put first?
Well, LeLe and Lizzi.
Yeah, we're going to go off the tongue a little bit more.
Alphabetical order, yeah.
Oh, alphabetical order. Oh,
yeah.
Nice. So as you guys can see from Lizzi's response here, she's a very technically and mathematically, logically gifted young Chinese woman that went to MIT. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it. It's a small school in Boston.
Yeah.
Anyway, after that, you got a PhD there, but you went to Wesley before in Massachusetts, correct?
Right. That's correct.
Right. So you're very Massachusetts. Of all the places to go to in America, the fact that you went to Massachusetts is really interesting. It's really special. But before we get back to get into that, do you want to introduce yourself to the English-speaking world?
Sure. Hi, guys. I'm Lizzi, and thank you so much for tuning in. As you guys can tell, I'm a little overdressed for the occasion. Overdressed. I actually have like 5 or 6 layers on me, and that's for a reason. So my heater is actually broken right now, and I'm currently in New York. It's like 20 degrees outside. So yeah, that's why I'm overdressed. But thank you so much, and I hope whenever you are, it's not 20 degrees, and if it's 20 degrees, your heater is working properly. But this is temporary. Yeah, they're supposed to get it fixed.
It's crazy. I mean, it was maybe 64, 65, which if you're a European and watching this, I think is maybe like 17 degrees in LA. And I was wearing long johns, the underwear, the long pants underwear that you only wear usually when you go skiing, at least as Americans. But in China, the long johns is a big deal.
Right.
People all wear them, right? Yeah, it's so cool. They call them the fall pants, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't wear them, all the old people in your life will tell you that you're going to get sick for sure.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's one of those. Yeah, it's like Chinese medicine. People have like very, polar opinions on Qiuku. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Polarizing opinions on Qiuku. Qiuku, I'm super pro. Qiuku are super. Qiuku, the fall pants, long johns that you wear beneath your jeans. They're extremely comfortable, very worth it. The investment. Yeah. So Lizzi, you work at a Chinese news station. Yes. Do you want to describe that a little bit as if if someone had no idea, if they don't even speak Mandarin?
Sure. So the news outlet I currently work for is called Wall Street News, 华尔街电视. So it's mostly a Chinese language media outlet. We are based in New York. So what we do is we broadcast news to mostly the Chinese-speaking community in the United States and also in China. For those of our Chinese audience who can jump across the Great Firewall through a VPN, they can access us on YouTube. And since we're based in the United States, there's no censorship, whatever, from the Chinese government. So we are free to speak about and also comment on things that are not considered kosher by the Chinese government. Say, we will report news, say on the Xinjiang genocide, we will report news on, say, the potential controversies regarding the source of the coronavirus and stuff like that. So, that makes us special compared with other Chinese media outlets based in mainland China, which, is heavily censored. And also, sure, go on. Please,
so interesting thing here is you use the word report because you guys do much more reporting than if you come somewhere like my channel where I'm really just shooting the shit really. I can't say that everything I say has a ton of research behind it. I'm just going off a feel.
Touch.
Yeah, a little bit more of a personal touch. But I think that the Mandarin internet does need a much healthier mix of that. A much healthier mix of some reporting where it just feels like, listen, this person's not trying to really sway my opinion in either way. They're just trying to tell me what's happening in an unfiltered and government not interfering in type of manner, right?
Right. That's actually, that's perfectly correct. And also, what I'm trying, so I actually struggle a little bit at the very beginning and try to sort of separate my personal voice from a more neutral and just, unaffectionate voice. So, now what we do is we have 2 separate channels. One is called 华尔街电视, the channel I just introduced, which is more sort of fact-based, straight reporting. And what we do is we sort of summarize and translate news from other credible media outlets, say New York Times and Wall Street Journal, on, when they report things that are of interest to our audience, we'll just translate and summarize that and report back to our Chinese audience. But sort of separate from that, I also carve out a personal channel. It's called 今日华尔街. So, Today on Wall Street, which is more of a a personal channel, but still, I mean, I would say it's sort of between LeLe style personal touch and like a straight news reporting sort of media platform.
Oh, it's
sort of in
leaning
between.
it leans much more towards news reporting, but you do
Yeah.
sprinkle a little bit of your own opinion and stuff in there.
Right. So, when I really wanted to, show, show off the other side of me, I would just go on your channel because
Right.
just like, be a
And
little
people
more
like it.
personal.
People are into it, especially our male viewers. They're really into it. No, I'm just kidding. Wait, before we get into some of the meat of what's going on with US and China and stuff on today's show, we should at least briefly touch on your background real quick. So you got a PhD in economics at MIT and decided to not go in that direction, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
And why was that? I mean, what led you to do what you do now versus something that might have been more reasonable with the degree that you got?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I wanted to sort of just look back a little more. So when I was a kid, so I, actually spent the first 10 plus years of my life in China. I was very much into writing and reading and sort of, commenting on current affairs. But, I was a kid, so it wasn't like anything that worth, writing back home for. And when I went to college, so I was just not sure like what I really wanted to do. So I sort of just went with what everybody else was doing. So, back in Wellesley, basically, you're either a, future Hillary Clinton, or you're a, future iBanker on Wall Street, or you went straight to grad school. So, those are the three paths that 90% of the people end up choosing. And I was much more leaning toward the academic track, or so basically I have this disdain toward people on Wall Street. Like, I'm just gonna say it. So it's I feel like they just talk too much and think too little. So I sort of have a disdain for that. And also, like, I was into math and I was into sort of the theoretical part of things. And I actually
not necessarily the profitable part of it.
Well, maybe. So I actually
maybe depending on how it's used.
Right. So I actually double majored in math, and during my undergrad years, I actually took a bunch of PhD level math classes at MIT, and did really well in them. So my professor was like, "Okay, so we know you, and we know what grad schools are like. We graduate from there, and based on what we know about you and what we know about grad school, we think you will make a really excellent professor if you decide to go there." And I was like, "Oh yeah, why not? Like, 5 years, 5 more years in school. I don't need to worry about the, future career or anything. I can just, go to class, which I really like, and kind of learn. And, studying, learning, that's something I'm good at. And I've been doing that for like my entire life. So I sort of just follow the flow into grad school. And I think, the one thing that really benefited me, looking back when I was in grad school, was like I got this 5 years of uninterrupted time to think about not only about my thesis, but also sort of think about my life in general. Because like there's no other things to worry about except you gotta be there like learning, writing, and teaching. Those are
it's such a rare and precious point of your life when the only thing you have to do, the only responsibility you have, is to just learn.
Right.
We just need you to learn.
Right. And I think I sort of decided to leave the academia probably during the third or the fourth year in my grad school life. But, after that, the choices were still like open. I can go to tech, I can go to investment or Wall Street, or I can go to the industry in general. I can go to a think tank. But, so the one thing that I found out about myself during grad school was I still love writing, and I still love reading, and I still like talking to people, and I still like to have my voice heard by other people. I mean, the difference between, writing as an academic and writing to or reporting to a general audience is really about sort of the level of specificity, and also the like what you expect from your audience, right? So, if you are a academic, you mostly talk with your colleague, people who know as much as you do. But as a reporter, what you want to do is to find a way to make new material interesting and not boring, and talk to a broader audience. And I feel like that that just sounds more interesting to me, and that's just something I wanted to do. But in terms of like which news outlet you want to work for, that's a different choice. I have to say, like, I want to be more entrepreneurial. Like, if I work for a mainstream premier outlet, I will be pigeonholed into those roles, and they just less opportunity for me to think about what I really want to do and what kind of news reporting I want to do. But like now, so I work for a small outlet. We're just starting, and the audience size is still small, and we're just growing our audience base. I feel like there's much more to do. There's much more to achieve, and I
Definitely.
see a lot of opportunities. So
Well, it's
广告经济
so
大有作为.
there's a lot of really interesting things that you touched on there that I want to go back to. So
Sure.
first of all, the feeling of that you're just kind of naturally being drawn to, oh, well, I like this, and this is kind of what society has done before. People have done before me, and so you just go to graduate school, and you're kind of just you're not necessarily that very. It's not necessarily fully your decision. It's like partly your decision, but then also an influence of what people think that you should do.
Right.
Right. And so I think it's really interesting in Chinese. There's a character, the piao. And piao means kind of like float, like a dandelion kind of floating through the sky. And they use it for a really great Chinese rap song by this Malaysian rapper that's called, my southern accent just came out. That's called, 我飘向北方, which means I float towards the north. And a lot of Chinese in China or a lot of the youth in China will complain or just comment on the fact that it feels like as a youth, if you really want to make something of yourself, if you really want to have a good career, you have to inevitably go to the north. And, despite the fact that Lizzi is toughing it out in very cold northeastern American weather, the north of China is not an easy place to live. Beijing's air quality, we all know, is pretty terrible. It probably might not be necessarily as bad as some of the Western media lets you believe, but it does have terrible bouts of like 1 or 2 weeks where you just don't see the sun. And so it's this kind of feeling of, but I still need to go there to make money. Like if I don't make money, then how am I going to survive? So it's kind of not necessarily my decision. I'm piaoing towards the north, right? And so that's the first character. That's the first thing I thought of when you were just describing that. And it's very common in Chinese society. I mean, you see it a lot. But then the other thing I wanted to say was the description that you're saying between you and your audience is really interesting, because between a teacher as an academician, you're basically in the same circles of people that are, very trained in processing information and being able to deduce from like a hypothesis that you're making or see a connection between variables that you're testing and like kind of maybe a regression that you're trying to pull out of something. But if you're just trying to reach a broader audience, you definitely have to try and empathize more with the audience and try and like think about, well, who makes up a lot of this audience? And what should I do to make what I say not only interesting, but stay within the scope of their understanding of the current events of the world?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if I like go, for example, a lot of my stand-up revolves around Chinese language stuff, and as a white guy living in China. Now, some of these jokes work on an audience, in LA, it'll work in New York, and it will work in San Francisco or maybe Houston, where there's like a large Asian population. But if I'm going to like, Kansas or something, if I'm going to like South Dakota, I would definitely have to change my material and kind of manipulate it a little bit to make sure that it fits within the scope of understanding of the audience that I have at that very moment. And I think as a comedian, it's the same as kind of what you're describing, especially the more and more you get towards commenting on news, towards sharing your opinion on news. And I think that's awesome. I mean, I think it's really cool, and I think it's really brave that you did that.
Yeah. Is there like a joke that you tried to pull on the audience, just completely failed and just like...
Oh, definitely.
100%.
I had one... I had one that was about ta 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 in Chinese. The he, she, it is all the same pronoun.
Right.
And so I have this joke where I talk about like, listen, like transgenders, like whatever your sexuality is, I don't really care. Like go do what you want to do. It doesn't matter. I think I made out with like a Thai lady boy. I'm like 95% sure it was probably a guy in Thailand at some point. when I was there, but I'm not positive it was a guy. If it was a transgender or whatever, he, she, it was very hot. It was very attractive.
Yeah. Right.
So I tried to say, like, I don't really care about what it is, but to think that someone is ignorant or stupid because of their misuse of a pronoun is silly. And to think that if we all change pronouns, especially if it's not something that's readily apparent that you're that biological gender,
Right.
I don't really think it's going to save, or I don't think it's really going to alleviate the situation that much, you know. And the example I draw on is in China, he, she, it is all the same fucking word. It's all ta, ta, ta. And I don't think that China is anywhere higher than America in terms of like their treatment of transgenders. But
it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Yeah.
But maybe the presentation of it wasn't right. Maybe the audience wasn't right in that day, to be honest with you. But I got this.
Yeah.
It's like right out of like a YouTube, like, or a Reddit viral video. It was like a middle-aged white woman with like very short hair that like had to tell me her opinion while her husband was like waiting to be like, okay, can we go home? I want to leave this. And she was just had a lot of things to tell me. That was the one where I would only have like someone that actually like had something like they wanted to like, I want to get this guy. In terms of jokes failing, oh yeah, tons. But I was lucky enough that I was hosting Chinese events, you know, and when I'm hosting Chinese events, I have the advantage of Chinese people want me to win. They're like, these guys speaking Chinese. I hope this guy's funny. I hope he succeeds. Whereas if you go into like a comedy club, they're like, oh, this guy's a straight white male. Fuck you, dude. What do you have to tell me? But it's interesting for you because you're facing a very divergent Chinese-speaking population that exists outside the Great Firewall. And for a lot of people that aren't familiar with that ecosystem, it's heavy MAGA. It's very heavy in the Trump direction and very deep in conspiracy theories that come from this media group called the Epoch Times a lot. But regardless of that, you know, doing this it's a ballsy move. I mean, you're kind of a badass.
Well, I mean, for people who actually know me, this is probably like the most badassy thing I've ever done in my life. But you know, honestly, I think one of the most fortunate things I've had in my life is my parents' support. Like, I think they just know me well enough to just not give a fuck anymore. Like, because I've surprised them so many times during my entire life, and somehow I still survived all my decisions. And they sort of learned that, oh, you know, Lizzi will probably surprise us at some point, you know, in her life, and she's probably gonna make it. So, you know, we just, you know, leave her to her own whatever and just stop bothering her. I think that has become my parents' attitude and their like default reaction whenever I surprise them somehow. So yeah. So
what, they just think that you're going to do it, or they just trust your opinion? Probably they just trust your judgment.
Yeah. So I think I'm so good at like just talking them into things that I wanted to do, and they've learned that, oh, you know, if they hold a different, like the opposite side of the opinion, they will still be convinced by me. So they just rather, you know, not listen to my argument and just, you know, just go straight line and trust my opinion and let me do it, because they know, you know, if there has to be an argument, they're going to fail in that argument, and if there's going to be a debate, I will come up winning. So yeah, so yeah, debating is one of the other sort of skills I gained earlier in my life, which turned out to be valuable later on. I think so. Yeah. So in middle school and also in high school, I was very heavily involved in, you know, high school debating team and also middle school debating team. And I felt like that was extremely valuable when you're trying to talk other people into believing what you want them to believe, even though you're not like 100% sure what you believe is actually what you're supposed to believe. But yeah, debating, a good skill to have.
But one that's very rare. And I'm not saying that Chinese people are not good at debating, but you do not have logic classes or any type of debate focus classes, or even there's most classes like where you're reading material like old literature, Chinese literature. It's not like they're asking the students for their opinions. It's, hey, this is Lu Xun, the most famous Chinese writer maybe ever, but I always say compare him to Mark Twain. he was just kind of a badass and very critical of not only Chinese society at that time, but also Confucianism and how he described it as it was ruining Chinese society. I mean, he wrote a book about a man that could finally see things clearly, and what he saw was zombies. The adults were just like cannibals that were eating the brains of children. And he was using that as a I guess motif or a metaphor for Confucianism's effect on Chinese society, to which you still see today. But it's only because in Chinese education, they ain't going to tell you, hey, you think about what Lu Xun said. They're going to say, hey, this is what he meant. You better memorize it, or else you're not, going to pass the test. Right?
Yeah. It's sort of like, there's like a certain formula to things, like how you were supposed to answer certain questions, right? So, Lu Xun is always 批判性现实主义. So, just, being critical of the society then, and also, revolutionary writer. So there are those certain phrases that you are supposed to memorize. And, whenever you get a question about Lu Xun, like how do you interpret this sentence written by Lu Xun, you're supposed to interpret that sentence through the lens of those formulas that you memorized. It's hard for me to explain to the American audience just because you guys don't have this bullshit back in high school. But for anyone who has experienced like Chinese 语文课, Chinese classes, you will know what I'm talking about. And the other thing I think I'm really lucky is growing up, the teachers I had in high schools and middle schools are very liberal. So, I mean, we still need to learn those stuff. But there's always this sense of like mockery or irony the way they taught us stuff. So, they will be like, okay, so, well, on exam, this is this is what you are supposed to do on your exam. Otherwise, you won't get the credit for your answers. But okay, this is what he really meant. So it's really nice, early on in your life to get that, double sides of things. And I mean, so like they are liberal, but they are not liberal in the sense that they are super like anti-communist party or something. But it's nice to get that sense of, irony and mockery when you're taught bullshit. So those things are not, actually how you are supposed to approach a piece of literary work. And
I mean, mockery and learning it through a sarcastic tone also can help you adapt or adopt the angle of the person that is trying to make you learn this type of answer, right? So to try and like satirize something, you have to think about the controller, the person I guess you could say is controlling the strings. So in this case, the Communist Party. Why are they making me memorize this interpretation of this piece? What is it about this piece and its other interpretations that could threaten them or just make them feel uncomfortable?
Right. And also, I feel like, so back in high school, it was almost
Hold on. Lizzi, you got to silence your phone.
Sure.
You got to see, you can't have it vibrating during a show. You gotta be nice to our audience. Just turn it on airplane mode.
Okay, so I'm gonna, great. So yeah.
Wait, you don't even know where it is, do you?
Yeah, I don't even know. Okay, so here's the phone, but like, I'm just gonna hide it in my blanket so like you guys can't hear it. This is like a buffing tone. But anyways, yeah. Sorry about that. Right. Yeah.
Lila and Lizzie are still on the way to being a much more professional show. Yeah. But we're certainly getting there. I mean, I definitely look a lot better than our last episode.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you definitely look, anyways, I should have told me earlier that we were supposed to wear a costume to this show. Otherwise, just like,
I don't know, this is necessarily a costume. I'm just trying to, spice up the visual adventure.
So so I actually have my Halloween costume all prepared for this year.
What is the Halloween? What was your Halloween costume?
I'm gonna be Janet Yellen. You know Janet Yellen, right? The incoming Treasury, the incoming Secretary of the Treasury. She has the best hairdo, in the history of U.S. Treasury Secretary. So she has this like, it's like a bob, but like she has this silver hair that's super smooth and silky, and it's great. So yeah, I'm gonna be Janet Yellen. Also,
I can't believe I haven't seen that on the cover of People magazine. Great. Out of all the U.S. Treasury secretaries we had, Ellen's definitely got the craziest hairstyle. Great. I feel like it's such a funny thing for you to actually think that anybody would know not only U.S. Treasury secretaries well enough, but their hairstyles well enough to be like, oh, I love Ellen's hairdo too.
Yeah, you guys. Anyways, but
we're not as culture. Americans are not necessarily as interested in politics as
Yeah,
other
that's
countries' peoples. Like I wouldn't necessarily say China, but I would say probably Europe. I think they're more involved in their politics.
yeah, that's interesting because I also think it might have to do with where you come from. I remember back in Boston. I went to this bar in Boston for like a couple times in my life, and all they talk about was like baseball games and football games and politics. And the politics are
Right.
like local politics. They're not like national politics. Who's going to be our next president? It's just a bunch of names that I have never heard of and turn out to be their sort of people who are running in their district elections. But in another place like New York, I actually seldom hear people talk about politics. Either
Well, Boston, they'll probably be, you have much more 土著 in Boston. With 土著 in Chinese is kind of someone that's been there for a few generations, right? In the same place. They're born and raised in the same place. Their parents are usually from there. And you'll hear it a lot in Beijing for people trying to brag that they're from Beijing, which I always try and compare to Boston. I mean, a lot of people like to say that Beijing reminds them a little bit of New York because they're very, I guess, straightforward. But New York is more similar to Shanghai in the way that it's very international. Boston and Beijing are very similar in the way that it's like, they're very just like, I don't have time for bullshit. It's cold. And they also like drinking culture, like all that, the accent. I mean, I feel like it's very similar.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with sort of, Boston to Beijing and probably New York to Shanghai. But yeah. Boston
maybe New York to Shanghai, maybe LA. But hold on, before we get to something that we were talking about before your phone vibration interrupted our show. No, I'm just kidding. It was probably my fault. Let's answer some of our audience's questions that they've already asked. I did take a picture of them with my phone just in case they got lost in the chat history. That's happened before.
Cool.
It makes me feel very embarrassed. 这是目前我最喜欢的中文学习材料，谢谢你。顺便说一句，我的母亲于1941年比你提前很多年从 Northfield 毕业了。Wow, that's very interesting. So 这是目前我最喜欢的中文。Jeremy Sight said, this is my favorite Chinese study material. Maybe he's referring to my show or our show, our first episode of it, which we did in Mandarin. I'm going to cut sections from the Mandarin shows and put English subtitles on them, though. Don't worry, guys, if you don't speak Chinese. I got you. 谢谢你. Thank you. I'm just going to say my mom also graduated from Northfield Mount Herman, which is the high school I went to. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you very much, Jeremy. I hope that we can help you with your Chinese studies in the way that Lizzi has helped me with my Chinese studies. Because for those of you that don't speak Mandarin, not only is it hard to find objective, but also well put together, concise, logical analysis of what's going on in China, but also with China's relationships with other countries. It's also hard to find it with not a very heavy accent. Okay, like Lizzi's boss has got, which I'm a fan of. I think he's a very fun guy, but he has got a thick accent, and a lot of the Chinese people that speak against the party are much older. Their accent is sometimes very difficult to understand.
Yeah. There's 老板. So my boss is always like his greatest pet peeve is when people complain about his accent. So like he's strictly against any mention of 普通话. So but anyways, he's super. I mean, in his mind, it's like, I don't know, it's like fascism against other dialects or something. So he's totally embracing diversity in accent.
He's a very interesting guy. I mean, he's a freaking character, man.
He's great. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. And it's interesting when you talk about like, how I landed my current job. But the short version of the story was basically we chatted during a conference at Harvard. And
hold on 1 second. Let me give a little bit of vague background of this guy. Sure. So he's probably in his late 50s or in his 50s, I think, maybe 40s. I might have just offended him. But the important thing about him is that he provides this service that the Mandarin speaking world is sorely lacking, which is just come on my show and share your opinion. Like if you're a professor at this school or, just a certain person in this Mandarin speaking media world, come on the show and share your opinion. And because he has done that, the extremely intense Chinese MAGA community is very against him because you have people that come on his show and talk shit on Donald Trump and just other stuff like that. I guess I'm assuming this is my very superficial knowledge. I will admit that it is. I was on the show itself, and I had Chinese audience members of mine threatening me with saying if I go on the show, they will unsubscribe. And I was like, what? Why? Who? What is wrong? Why are people so scared of this dude? And I went on, and him and I had a great discussion. We had a great time. It was like old buddies having beers at the bar in Boston. But so go ahead with your story. I just wanted to give the audience a little bit of background about this guy.
Yeah, so yeah, this guy, yeah, my boss, yeah, current boss. So I actually had this. So we were at this conference at Harvard. It was on like a completely just a not so relevant topic. It's like China-U.S. relations or something. I actually can't remember what the conference it was about. And I was actually a reader of some of their earlier publications. So before we went to like video production, we're actually in like Hong Kong and Taiwan for like 30 plus years doing publication. And many of the publications are actually considered some of the most authoritative and also authentic sources on Chinese insider politics. So there was this book on Bo Xilai. So, one of the officials that got thrown out during Xi Jinping's anti-corruption campaign
probably the biggest. It was like the biggest
huge political scandal in China,
right.
Probably the political scandal of the century. And it's interesting because Bo Xilai was involved in some of the offshore financing scheme and actually learned about the Bo Xilai case in one of the international finance class I took back as an undergrad. And the book he wrote with a co-author was translated into English, was actually on sort of the reference list of the class. So that's how I got to know the name. And, during the conference, I saw him, I just I wanted to be friendly and, struck up a conversation with him. And we actually chatted a little bit. And the topic just wandered all the way into what I was studying, what I was working on at that point. And then we started talking about how one's message got distorted during the process of information transmission. Interestingly, I was actually working on a chapter of my thesis on this idea of disinformation created during the transmission of information. So it was very theoretical. It was this very sort of graph theoretic model. And we actually chatted about this, and I was like, okay, so this guy has never taken an economic class, has never taken anything on game theory, but he has this great intuition about why people mistrust, why people distort material, and how that potentially affect the media landscape that we see, not only in China, or not only in the Chinese language, not only in the Chinese language community, but also, across the world, and how people can be echo chambered into their information bubbles, and how people retreat into their own bubbles because of the mistrust information or people's sort of natural bias to believe in things they already believe in. And I was just like, this guy's a genius. Like, he has never taken the class, all those things, but he can
just feel it.
Yeah, he has this super great intuition of things that just surprised me and stunned me, to be honest. And so, by that time I was already thinking about sort of transitioning into a different career. I could be a writer, I could be a freelancer. And, the more I chatted about him, the more I was like, okay, we are so aligned in our goals, and he also gives me the freedom to work on my own project. And he's curious, he's open to new ideas, and he's not afraid to learn. And that's probably the one thing that I appreciate him the most. So, just naturally, one thing led to another. And anyways, yeah, it's supposed to be like an honest assessment of my boss, but it's mostly positive. There are negative things about him that I'm complaining about.
So my subjective assessment of hanging with the dude for the time that we did we did like 40 minutes together, maybe even an hour, and we had a great time. And for me as a comedian, what I really care about in life is if I can make someone laugh, especially someone that I kind of respect, especially if I can make them laugh. It's like a drug for me almost. And he had it. I had him going, man. He had a ton of questions that I was asking, or that he was asking me, And you could tell that if my answers, some of them, he was like, you know, he was just like, yes, that's exactly what he feels. But it was cool that he had like this service or this 平台, this platform for people to come and just talk, like just try and hash out opinions that maybe you're not 100% on. You're just trying to feel out thoughts through communication and discussion with other people. And because of what Lizzi was describing with the Chinese education system, where, you know, it was very rare for someone like her to be able to have experience with debate and like that. And as a consequence of this Chinese education system, you just have armies of Chinese netizens, I guess you could say, but I think that they exist in other languages too. I think it's just probably magnified or made worse by the Chinese Communist Party's influence, but they just don't want to hear anything that's different from their own opinion. And if you do have an opinion that's different from theirs or the very opposite of theirs, you know, they want to attack. They want you to die. Like they fucking hate you. And it's almost like a knee-jerk reaction, similar to what you would see in Orwell's 1984 with like when they talk about putting the guy up there. I forget his name, but it would be on the big screen. It's like the hate session or something. I forget what it's called. And people just like, they just like feel hate for this guy for like 5 minutes just looking at his picture. And you see that a lot with Chinese people, and it's not, you know, their own fault. I think it's very much a fault of the Communist Party as well as the education system. But with the Chinese education system, what are you going to do? 1.4 billion people. How do you have an education system that's anything close to fair?
Yeah.
Right.
And also, you know, so this is just like my conjecture. I don't have hard evidence for that. I mean, the fact that there's not an authoritative like media outlet in the Chinese media landscape also, you know, contributed to some of the extremism we see on both sides. So, you know, I mean, you know, New York Times, CNN, Fox, you can complain about them, but they tend to be sort of the pillars of the US media landscape. And, you know, I mean, there's like a spectrum of audience. There's always a spot for you that you feel trustworthy and comfortable. I mean, if you're super, you know, alt-right, yeah, there's OANN, there's Newsmax.
There's a home for you.
Yeah, so, you know, it's just easy to find a outlet that's comfortable and trustworthy for you. But, you know, for the Chinese media landscape, it's either what you hear from the Communist Party propaganda, pure propaganda, or sadly, it's more of the, you know, the conspiracy thing, the, you know, people who have an agenda to topple the Communist Party, and they, you know, they will just ignore facts as long as, you know, the message they want you to accept is beneficial to their political agenda. So there's really sort of this vast sort of empty space in between. So what we are trying to do is really to sort of cater to the middle a little bit, if you will, and also and also to fill in some of the gap in between. It's going to be hard because you're going to be tortured by both sides. You know, people who are super 小粉红, super pro-China are going to accuse you for being a traitor, and, you know, people are like super anti-China also. You know, people who actually have a political agenda will also accuse you and trash you for like working for the Chinese government and being sort of a CCP mouthpiece. Only you report, you know,
or if you just don't like Trump, like you report something that he said or did. It's just very extreme.
It's super extreme. So I would say, you know, it's hard to find a space in between. But honestly, I think it's the most promising field. I mean, you learned Hotelling theorem back in your undergrad, you know, econ class. You know, so basically, you know, on a linear spectrum of things, people will go to the store and the hoteling model that's closely aligned with their preference. So here we only have two media outlets on the two extremes. If you can sort of anchor yourself in middle, you can grab part of the audience who are, you know, who chose those two extremes by default, or chose those extremes by the lack of a better option to you. But it's going to take some time. We are still growing. We just got started, there are still, many
And
things.
on the way there, you're gonna be attacked from both sides.
Right,
And
right.
I see that because I get called every name in the book, right? So Baizuo is kind of, I guess you could say, libtard or social justice warrior. And I also get called Baiyo, which is just like it's kind of like a redneck or the dumb white righty or far right white person. I also get called lunzi, which means like wheel in Chinese, but it's also a term that's used to try and attack Epoch Times media people or people that like their channel. I mean, I get called every single one of these names in the book, which I think the only rational conclusion is that because I don't really go too hard to any side, the Chinese community just doesn't know how to interpret me, and honestly, you as well. And so the knee-jerk reaction is to just spit out labels at you that just it's a libtard. I don't have to pay attention to him anymore. Whew, that was close. He was talking about Trump's business in China there. That was great. As I was starting to actually think that maybe Trump's a liar or doesn't care about me.
I would say another talent I have is I'm super thick-skinned. Honestly, people sometimes I mean people who are genuinely concerned, they would ask me how do you actually deal with those people? Like what's your coping mechanism? Do you just I don't know, do you just beat your dog or something? How do you actually cope with that? And honestly, I mean I have some of the best trolls. I literally look at their comments and laugh because it's just so hilarious, and the kind of labels they put on you just beyond your wildest imagination. And honestly, I feel like this is probably one of my assets. I don't know where I got them. Maybe it's just because
thick skin.
Yeah, just really thick skin. I feel like if you're gonna, especially if you're a woman, if you're gonna put your face out there and appear 100%. On TV and talk to people, there will be many kinds of
as a woman it's so much harder. I mean, the same thing you see in stand-up comedy too.
Yeah, but
it is so much more difficult.
Right.
It's an unfair world that we live in. Here, let's see real quick because I think I probably missed some people's questions.
Sure.
Sorry to interrupt you. I like Mr. He though. Mr. He, he gives me a good feeling, and we should have him on the show sometime.
Yeah.
On our next Chinese episode.
I'm a fan of Mr. Ho, so He Xiansheng.
Oh, He Xiansheng 粉丝支持 LeLe and Lizzi. Nice.
Yeah. Okay,
very
so
cool.
Yeah. Wait, did we actually say something did we actually trash Mr. Ho? No, we were all very positive about him, right? So now, yeah.
Well, I don't know enough about him to trash him. If I really am going to come out and criticize someone or satirize them, I do a lot of work beforehand just so I try not to look like an idiot.
Okay.
But I talk way too much just freely in streams every week to not have periods where I look back and I'm just like, gosh, that was so dumb. What was I thinking? LeLe, 你的中文有 Lizzi 英文好吗？前天你忘记谈关于张维维的看法了。Oh man.十里山路不换肩. Our user here is our good friend, our member 10 Lee's doesn't switch shoulders, which is a reference to a meme of something that China's Xi Jinping said one time in an interview. Asked us, LeLe, he asked if my Chinese is as good as Lizzi's English, which is definitely answer is no, 100% not.
Well, you're just being humble, but I mean, let's just admit that your Chinese is amazing, especially you have this Jingqiang, so
right, a little bit of a Beijing accent,
but it's not quite accent. It's just you have this natural way of sounding really authentic. And anyways, yeah.
Well, my thing where I definitely lose to you is I make grammatical errors all the time, and it's because I'm an extroverted dude that likes talking to people. And what made my Chinese good was when I was in Nanjing, Shanghai, or Beijing, I was always trying to talk with Chinese people. And what happened was my accent would get better and better, but I didn't have the writing. I wasn't, wasn't in an environment where I was having to write in Chinese constantly. And as a consequence, my writing didn't get better, which affects your ability to grammatically piece together complex thoughts. I think is where I really need to get better. And I'm trying. I mean, I'm purposely trying to get better at this now.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Here's one thing that I don't know if I'm alone or if every sort of language learner is like us. my writing style is actually completely different from my talking style when it comes to English. So the only reason I can think of is I learned how to talk in English by watching American soap operas. So I have a much more relaxed way of speaking. So when I actually, but like when I actually write down English, I don't mean like texting friends, but I actually, write down my thoughts. The way I learned to write was in like formal education in, college writing class, and also through my, research on economics. So it just sounds like a completely different person. So, if you read what I wrote first before meeting me in person, you would be surprised at the way I talk, because there's no personality consistency throughout my writing and sort of across my
Well, it's
writing.
probably because it's a little bit more technical too.
Yeah, that's also true. But like, so I can't really write down how I feel. I can only talk about it first, and I write down what I spoke. On the other hand, so the way I talk about technical stuff or logical stuff is I always have this paragraph in my mind. It's all well thought out. It's like a paragraph
organized very carefully.
Yeah, with like with like a thesis and with like supporting evidence with
right. Yes,
transitions
100%.
in between. And when I talk, I actually sort of repeat what's already written in my head. So it bothers me a little bit. I don't know if it's just like, and also like I have huge insecurities about tense when I speak, because when I write, I have an opportunity to go back and correct them. Right, this is something that happened in the past.
Right, you can go back and see if you fucked up, and when you present it to someone, it's already perfect. You're good to go.
Right, it's just like hard. I don't know. It's just like, okay, so it's like a live show. Like you can't just go back and edit the stupid things that you say. But I still have huge insecurities about but
you're still. I mean, you're still of the Chinese people that didn't, grow up in America that I know. I mean, you're top 3 for sure, and you could be one of the best. I just don't really remember others that well, but you're definitely up there, and that's really cool because something like tense in Chinese is actually relatively simple, and that's the secret of learning Mandarin Chinese. Mandarin is one of the hardest languages to learn in the world. However, its difficulty is in things like the tones and the characters for sure, but the tones. When I go and do a video where I'm just looking at the camera and I'm kind of like presenting an essay, it's very much a hypothesis with supporting arguments and then a conclusion type format. I write that script just in the same way that you just described, where I will go back carefully and make sure it is perfect before I'm like, okay. And then I start to practice it over and over and over. I'll just practice it while looking at it. Then I'll record myself speaking it. I'll listen to it in my head in these headphones, walking around, mimicking it. And that's the thing about Chinese that makes it so difficult is it's the tones. So if you have the tones kind of memorized in the feel of each sentence, for example, the question that we just got here, LeLe, 你的中文有 Lizzi 英文好吗? Like there's kind of a cadence to the sentence when you speak it. And if I'm trying to come across as witty or I'm trying to make points that I really care about, I better make sure that my Chinese is like presentable. That being said, I also do streams where I just got to wing it and fuck up constantly because of that. But the easy part of Chinese is the grammar. The grammar is relatively pretty easy, especially tenses. So when Chinese people are learning English, what I always say is Chinese is certainly much harder, beginner and intermediate. But once you're at an advanced level, the characters, you start to see relationships between them. You can kind of guess what a word means, even if you've never seen it before. And in English, I feel like it's the opposite, because you can get to an intermediate level of English with relative ease. But when you really want to start taking grammar seriously and make sure your tenses are good, it is tough. Because I have Chinese people that ask me, like, why was it have or just questions that I have no idea to answer. I'm just like, it just is. I don't know how to explain it to you,
Yeah. Okay. So here's just a random question that just, came to my mind. What's your go-to material, like learning material when you're learning Chinese as sort of a beginner?
Oh, as the beginner, it's you just got to get I was like you. I was lucky. I had a few good teachers that changed my life. I mean, I think this is why education is such an important issue in this country, if not the most important issue. Because if you just have a few good teachers, it will change your life. Like I can trace everything back that I'm doing now, like my Chinese abilities. It came from, first of all, I had a great first teacher in high school who just like didn't give up on me, would like make me go over to her house to like do practice sessions at night, like free tutorial sessions. And then I went, oh my God. And then I went to, holy shit. Oh, I went down the wrong pipe.
Oh no.
Okay. Then I went to college and had the same thing. And then I went to the Central Academy of Drama, which is the same thing.
Yeah.
Teachers that inspire you.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, because when I look back, I probably just waste like the first 5 years of my life learning like garbage English. It was like, those like English textbook in China, right? So it's like, this is a pencil, that is a desk. Like I've never said those sentences in my entire life, but that's somehow what I learned for the first 5 years of my English learning career. And I was lucky to be exposed to like American soap operas at a young age, and that's how I got to know how Americans actually talk, like how people actually talk in their life. They're not like, they don't say things like, this is a pencil, that is the desk, and they tend to
feel that you have to develop from watching a lot. I feel it too. When I get really into a Chinese TV show, I'll get the same thing where I can kind of feel myself just kind of freestyling more than really thinking about the grammatical patterns that I need to pull out of my pocket to convey the meaning that I want to get across.
Right.
And I think looking at shows is really important for that, but especially for people studying English, because grammar is something that I feel like if you watch enough and you're exposed to enough things, you can feel when it's wrong. I met Da Shan, the most famous Chinese guy or the most famous white dude in China in Chinese history. His Chinese is great. He's a Canadian performer. He did the xiangxiang, which is called crosstalk, but it's kind of like it's not really like stand-up comedy, but it's kind of like stand-up comedy, I guess you could say. It's very humorous. It's very difficult with speaking. Now, this guy, I ran into him in a cafe in Shanghai one time. And I was 5 years in. It's so funny that you said you wasted 5 years, because I say the same thing all the time. For the first 5 years of Chinese, I feel like until I really got to the Central Academy of Drama, I didn't have enough honesty in my life where teachers were like, no, actually every single tone in that sentence was wrong. And I was just like, what? Are you serious? I basically had to push the restart button. But I saw the Canadian guy, his name's Mark, Dashan, Big Mountain. I saw him in a cafe in Shanghai. I'd been studying for 5 years at that time. And I just got to the Central Academy of Drama, where I had teachers telling me that basically I'd learned Chinese incorrectly. And I was close to giving up. And I saw this dude. I was like, I got to talk to this guy, because I knew him very well. I had seen him on TV and stuff. I went up to him. He was extremely nice. And he very carefully answered me. And he said, what you really got to aim for is within 8 to 10 years, you should be at a level where if you have a tone that's wrong, it can bite your own ear, and that you can correct yourself. That if you were like in a sentence right there, if you really wanted to, but that was like 前天你忘记谈关于张为为. Like, so let's say, for example, the way there in this question that our user just asked here is a double tone. So it can have two different tones based on the context. And in this context, it's a second tone. Now, if I said it in a fourth tone and I was familiar with the word that this person is saying, you would hope that fourth tone being way and not lay would hit my ear in the same way that if you screwed up a have gone to, whereas what you meant to say is going to, would hit your ear. And the only way that I really think helps with that, obviously you should study and learn, but just watch shows all the time, And that's the tough thing about Chinese, is there's not a lot of great resources to learn, because the Communist Party really affects the entertainment.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And that's a bummer.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on then. Here down. Oh yeah. So I will answer your question, by the way. Go 关于张维维. I'll do that in the next Chinese stream. I can't believe I forgot to answer that. He asked me 2 questions that I didn't know who he was talking about. Okay, let's see what we got here. Someone said people are fighting in chat. Good. Let them fight. How can you change people from following leader like a herd without thinking independently to more like a wolf pack that more independently in China? Lizzie, this is...
Yeah, no, you go first. This is a tough one. I got to think first.
How can you change people from following the leader like a herd without thinking independently to more like a wolf pack? What is a wolf pack type of thinking is the question. Like, do you mean that we're like independently thinking, but we're of the same team?
Yeah, I think
I would assume that's probably what it means.
Yeah, that's probably what he means.
I think that one way that you can do it is, I would have said, if you asked me this 4 months ago, I would have said, expose them to the information outside the wall, and they will hopefully, the majority of the population will be able to, eventually get it for themselves. I guess you could say start walking on their own 2 legs. But after this election and seeing just how easily so much of the Chinese internet space just got sucked deep into a lot of far right like conspiracy theories and stuff, it's a tough question. I don't really know, because it made me think that if the Great Firewall crumbles tomorrow, someone else is just going to come in and use, because it's money. That's why you spread misinformation. That's why a lot of these companies spread the news that they do, is because they can make money and get internet traffic from it. So with the capitalism pushing internet companies to develop algorithms that just want your attention and don't really concern themselves much with what you're consuming, whether it's fake or real, I think it's one of the most interesting questions. And honestly, I don't have a fucking answer. I don't know what you would do. Let's just say if the Great Firewall crumbled tomorrow and you just had 1 billion Chinese internet users pour out into the internet space, which is very difficult for a lot of first-time firewall hoppers to process. It's hard to handle just how ridiculous the real internet is, not to mention how much fake information there is out there.
Interesting. No, that's a great perspective. I mean, if I had to add my 2 cents here, I think so. In Chinese culture, there's this lack of celebration for someone being different. I mean, in school, if you're the kid who's talking against the teacher and speaking up to the teacher, you're the one who's punished, not only by the teacher himself, but also by your classmates, because you're the troublemaker in class. So I feel like growing up, we are used to sort of stay in line and stay, or at least talk and act like the same, like everyone else, just because there's always this sort of underlying fear of being the one who's punished if we dare to speak differently.
What's that Chinese phrase where the first bird that sticks his head out is the first one to get shot?
Oh gosh. Okay, 木秀于林，风必摧之. So it literally means if a tree is taller than the other trees, then when the wind blows against the forest, the tallest tree will be the first to be sort of blown down and just thrown out of the way by the wind. So yeah, that's what I think of. I mean, so this actually reminds me of my little brother. So my stepbrother's experience. So he was born in Texas, and he went back to China when he was a primary school kid. I mean, in the U.S., if you're different, if you're unconventional, you're sort of this really cool dude that people like and admire.
Right.
But in Chinese classroom, he was really just given a hard time by the teacher. Right. And so in China, if you're the one who's different, who's naughty, you're the one who's disciplined by the school.
Right.
And
you're the problem. Versus the unique individual.
Yes. And the way they do that is they literally ask my parents, so my dad and my stepmother, to school, and the 3 of them had to stand in front of the entire classroom listening to the teacher scolding my little brother. That was literally what happened. And so, after that, actually, my dad was the one who was super humiliated. I mean, if he was not the one standing in front of the classroom, he probably just would let it go. But he has such great pride. And he was like, okay, no, we're not going to take this. So they literally just pulled my little brother out of school starting the second day. And, the moral of the story was really, so my little brother was someone who experienced a transition from a US system to the Chinese system. And the thing that was really jarring for him was he was no longer the cool one. He was no longer the one who's like creative and different, and he just like this like leader that everyone is like admiring. He became this just total, just like the one that's picked by the teacher, the one that's different from everybody else, and the one that's causing trouble, and the one who deserves to be, standing in front of the entire classroom being scolded by the teacher. So, I mean, if that's the kind of culture that Chinese kids grow up in, I fear that when they grow up, even when they're given the opportunity to access the outside world, jumping across the Great Firewall, something so innate in the culture, in their upbringing, will still sting them when they, when they see something different, because just the fear of being different will still sort of have a toll on their life later on in their life when the constraint is no longer there. Personally,
you kind of become the monster that you didn't like as a kid almost. You become the one that as soon as you see something that's different from the popular opinion in any realm, in so many realms, but you especially see it in celebrity gossip and like how the Chinese netizens can so quickly like turn on a Chinese celebrity for doing something that is not accepted by the population. Which naturally brings us to, we'll make it the last conversation or the last topic of our second episode here tonight. The Chinese actress Zheng Shuang, who is she's like my age. She's like our age, I think.
Yeah, she's our age, I think.
She's like late 20s, and she is an actress. I guess you could say that. She's pretty bad in my opinion. I think she's
I'm glad you said that, because I don't need to say that.
I think she's actually pretty terrible, but she is very famous, very well known for a variety of TV shows and movies. And she, with her boyfriend of 7 months, I think they were not dating for a very long time. They went to America, or they came to America and got married here, I think it was, right? And and then they also found two surrogate mothers to birth her and her newlywed husband surrogate babies. Right. You want to take the story from here? Go ahead.
No, that's basically all I know about this Chinese.
Oh, okay. So then I'll finish it for everyone. So she then, with her newlywed husband, goes back to China, decides not only does she not want to be with her husband anymore, but now she also doesn't want the kids that the surrogate mothers are, I think, 7 months pregnant. 7 months pregnant. And there was a recording of her speaking with her dad, and I think her mom too, and maybe another person, but they were like saying things like, it's 7 months, like you can't abort it at 7 months. And then the dad being like, no matter what, I really think that we're going to have to do it. I mean, we're going to have to find a way to make that happen. So good part about this story is that the kids were not aborted at 7 months. They were birthed, and the man in the relationship, I forget what his name is, had to take responsibility for them. He's also got like some huge fine or something. And Zheng Shuang, the female actress, I guess left him hanging, is my understanding of it. And the whole Chinese internet, as soon as this recording of her being like, come on, 7 months, can't we take care of this thing, goes out there, and this woman who is like trying to maintain this like very well put together, I'm a really nice, like, hey, I'm just like your cute little born after the 1990s generational girl, they now see her as just a villain. Like this here is just absolute like Bane from Batman, just like the destroyer of worlds. And the Chinese internet just turns on her so quickly, but also anybody that is trying to argue for something like surrogacy, which I didn't even know until this like trending topic happened in China, was such a point of debate, was just such like a divergent things, because my knee-jerk reaction is you should obviously legalize it, because if you look at prostitution, if you look at drugs, it's legalization, even though it doesn't appear to be the answer, is almost always the answer. Is usually what you, but I saw valid arguments for both sides trying to research this subject. and I was a little hesitant to speak out about it because you're seeing it not only in China, but you're actually seeing it in Korea and Japan. Some of their netizens are participating in it too. It is just kind of like a witch hunt for anybody that's kind of taking either side, I guess you could say. But it's very interesting just how the knee-jerk reaction is, let's all attack the person that has the different opinion. Right. And I bet that type of mindset probably affected your brother as well. But yeah.
Yeah, but my brother is doing well these days. He's mostly staying home and playing mahjong with the neighborhood's 大爷大妈. So
in China.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, it's difficult though to lose someone trying to help grow and foster your individuality. Yeah, that's if the American education system needs a lot of work, but I think that the American spirit does do a good job of being like, hey, if you're unique, that's a good thing. Like, keep going, hopefully. Right.
Yeah. But coming back to this topic of Zheng Shuang. So
yeah, let's get back to it.
Yeah, I think we both agree she's not that great as an actress. But are there any actors or actresses, in China that you think are professional by United States standard or by sort of the world standard?
By international standards?
I don't think
What about you?
So
do you think?
I don't know. So I mean I don't watch a lot of Chinese TV shows, and I think my favorite Chinese actress is probably Si Qinggao, who's kind of old, and she usually plays this sort of matriarch kind of character and like Chinese TV shows. So she's definitely not one of the she's just not like the headline of Chinese version of People magazine or something. She's sort of in the background, and people had this idea of she being professional, also really good, but never sort of the leading role in a movie. But when you look at those sort of younger actresses or like leading actresses and TV shows and also movies, I don't know. I just feel like, is there someone who's actually good? Like, I can't really think of a name off the top.
For younger
for
actresses under the age of like 35, or actors or actresses, I don't know. Probably not. And if there was, maybe they got scared away from the industry because it's so terrible in China. I mean, China's entertainment industry is really messed up. I mean, think about how messed up the entertainment industry here is in LA, and you have actors unions, you have entertainment unions that try their best to protect workers, and you still have people doing ridiculous things in their pursuit of fame, in their pursuit to be somebody. Right. In China, without the protection of unions is one component of it. The other is acting is because you have the government censoring all these films and TV and television shows. You don't really have any good entertainment products, at least in the last, I don't know, when was 不是药神, the movie where this guy, it was very similar to Dallas Buyers Club, but Dallas Buyers Club is about the AIDS pandemic in China, and the AIDS problem in China. There's basically not really, I mean, especially if you hold it to the standard of international film standards, you're not going to find anything good for probably the last decade at least.
Yeah.
What that does as a consequence is these young Chinese people don't develop a good sense of like what is good and what is not good. They kind of, when they go to a movie, I'm not saying all Chinese people or all Chinese audiences like this, because for every 5,000, 16-year-old girls that want to see Tiny Times, basically shittier version of Sex in the City, right, you also have like a strong population of probably like 100 Chinese people that are just like, they see the strings that are pulling everything. They kind of see through the farce that is China's entertainment industry, which is they're just trying to reproduce and repackage the same shit for their audience that the audience really eats up, because they haven't had a chance to really cultivate a higher sense of what art should be. Because the government, what they say in Chinese is they'll say 阉割, which means to castrate. Yeah. Sorry, my English is not great. To cut off your balls or wiener. And it takes off the interesting part of all art. And you have not only that, so the people that are attracted to this film, and like the acting school that I went to is considered the best in China. bar none. It's one of the hardest schools to get into in China for Chinese people, not necessarily for foreigners. But these kids that were there, you probably had 60% of the kids that I was in this acting class with that were just pure narcissistic egomaniac pieces of shit that like really couldn't feel empathy for anybody else but themselves. And you would see it because we'd have to do homework where you have to like go observe someone. You just have to go find someone and observe them. And then you have to mimic them. Like, right. So a lot of these kids would go mimic these street vendors outside our school that kind of like, make Chinese tacos, I guess you would say, those bing bar, like Chinese pancakes with stuff inside them. And these kids, in trying to mimic them, you just see how much they don't give a fuck about the person that they had to observe for that period of time. And they're just going through the motions to try and get through this class and get this grade over with. And they're not really at all invested into the art of acting or any performance for that matter. And what they're more interested in is the vanity, which they've been getting probably since they were like 16. And they have like tens to sometimes hundreds of thousands of followers on Weibo, the Chinese Twitter. By the time some of these kids are 18, they got all these followers online that are just telling them, you're beautiful, you're awesome, you're so smart, you're cool. Like I always joke, I wouldn't want to hang out with me before I was 24. Like I was pretty big piece of shit. And you just had to keep fucking up and keep getting like smacked in your face. But I can't imagine if the whole time while I was young, people were just telling me, dude, you don't need to change. You don't need to second guess anything. You're awesome. You're killing it. Keep going. Like you're great. You don't need to reflect at all. And the consequence is horrible acting.
Yeah.
You just get horrible acting, right? I mean, some of these actors that are famous, like Zheng Shuang, are just terrible
to watch. I mean, oh gosh, I mean, I if I go acting, I would probably be worse, but it's just really painful to watch. Like it's not even unprofessional. It's just really like, so the one thing that really confuses is like, where do they get their like millions of followers with their acting skills? Are they just like Shuijun, right? Are they like fake fans? I don't know, their agent purchased online, or they're actually real people who...
That's one resource for sure.
Okay. Yeah.
But when they get developed more, I think it becomes just this culture of idol culture, right? Mm-hmm. So where the people, especially younger kids, mm-hmm. will just see this person. And a lot of the times it's because the person is physically attractive by the national, very similar taste of beauty that the Chinese society has, right? So they'll have like big eyes, a tall nose, I guess you could say, double eyelashes, a thin face, right? Very thin for women, extremely skinny, and very pale. And this goes back to what you were saying before with your brother as well, is like, it's this idea of if you're not a part of the group, the majority, then fuck you. But it also goes two ways, so that if you are a king of the majority, like the majority view for sense of beauty in China fits a certain mold, where someone like Christopher Wu mm-hmm. Or Zheng Shuang, I guess you could say, because of their looks, when they go on the screen, a lot of the Chinese users that have not experienced the taste of authentic art do not know that when you're looking at a movie or a film, or a film or a TV show, it's not just like eye candy. It's not just like porn, where you're just like in it for the dopamine releases that you get from looking at something attractive. You're hopefully trying to get inspired and have some type of emotional connection with the material, but that just doesn't get cultivated, that idea.
So if there's like one industry in China that I feel really doomed, or just I'm completely pessimistic about, is just the entertainment industry. I honestly just don't think there's a way forward. I mean, first, as you mentioned, there's sort of this information environment that's completely censored. People don't know what good art is supposed to be like. Mm-hmm. And the entire industry, as you just mentioned, the system of narcissism, the system of over packaging, the system of, having your agent purchasing fake fans without people calling you out, mm-hmm. It's just completely messed up. So, I feel really bad for those kids who could be the next LeLe, who could be the Chinese Hemingway, who just
There you
got
go.
trapped in the system.
I'm definitely not anywhere on that list.
Hemingway was like one of my favorite American writers. Is
Nice.
as American as Hemingway. That's just sort of my he's one of my literary idols. But yeah, we can talk more about American literature. But I feel so sad that they might be trapped in the system. There's
we're gonna miss out.
Yeah, they're missing out. And what's a way out? Like,
hold on, not only they're missing out, the world is missing out.
Yes.
Like I showed my parents, like I watched Parasite, that Korean movie with my parents. I watched that movie. Also, Train to Busan is a great zombie film, a Korean zombie film. I think it's probably my favorite zombie film of all time. And Train to Busan, like that movie made me cry. Parasite made me feel every emotion in the freaking book. And when, as like my parents who are baby boomers, are able to like see this film and you're able to identify and you're seeing Korean society, but you're feeling deep down inside, I know these characters, I know these feelings, these things exist in my life too. Right. And you get this almost ineffable sensation that we're all somehow connected, that there is some type of truth to being a human being, that as the world we miss out on from the Chinese art society. Like if you look at any period in Chinese history where the government wasn't intervening in Chinese arts, they just blossomed and it was quick. It was just like, boom, like you just had brilliance.
Yeah.
And that's really what I say. If anything makes me anti-CCP, it's that. It is this inability for the world to connect with China and Chinese people to connect with the world because we don't have the passageway of art.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you when you brought up Korea, I mean, the entertainment industry in Korea is by no means perfect. I mean, you have the similar problems of sort of this singular beauty standard that everyone has to conform to, especially if you're a young actress. Also, if you look at some of the movies they produce, I mean, they are much better than the Chinese ones. But the acting is a little flat compared with really good actors. But I think the main difference there is, there's no censorship as we experience in China. So, things like Taxi Driver, things like The Parasite, those movies can actually be produced and, be viewable to the international audience. But
it's also, if you have freedom of speech, it's not I'm not trying to say that America doesn't have horrible films or horrible actors that are way more famous than they should be, because they do. I mean, look at the success of Marvel films and like all these other films. I'm not trying to diss Marvel or anything, but it is kind of like a roller coaster or porn. Like you're just in it for the ride. You're not really trying to pull that much out of it. That does exist, but because you have freedom of speech, you can criticize it. You have pieces that are satirical, or you like people go out. And so if you also look at these movies and you're like, if you're looking at Tiny Times, 小时代, this Chinese movie series that is horrible, but it's so popular, and it's very similar to Sex and the City, just much younger and much worse. Sex and the City is kind of awesome. You just have, 小时代 will come out 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it will make tons of money. And if you go and try and criticize it, first of all, you're going to get fucking sniped. I mean, you're going to have their massive internet troll army attack you. But you could also, if you go too deep, if you go too critical or any of that stuff, it causes too much controversy. I mean, you'll get swiped up. Like it could get deleted off the Chinese internet. Or if you analyze anything too deep, like for example, why the fuck does Tiny Times 1, 2, 3, 4 exist in the first place? Like the Chinese government is actually to blame for a lot of it because of their censorship. So if you're a comedian or a rapper, right, and you're trying to create a piece to criticize popular society, you always have Big Brother standing right behind you, breathing down your neck. And it's like, ooh, I don't know if you should say that. That's not gonna fly well. That's not gonna work. And what you get is a continuation of this yenge, of this castration. All right, let's go to another question here before we end this. Okay. That's really interesting. I mean, I could talk about Chinese film and TV industry for days because I have experience in it. I did TV shows there and stuff. Okay, let's see what we got here.
Oh my goodness, no, all my respect.
上次的乐乐和 Lizzi 就看入了迷，想看乐乐和 Lizzi 的第2集，还想听英文版，居然实现了。By the way, I'm working towards a math PhD in the USA.
Good for you. Math is
All right.
so yeah. Okay,
You want
so
to translate this for the non-Chinese speaking audience?
okay, so basically, this is a fan of our first show, and he says he wants to, see more of our shows, and he wanted to see English version of it. So here we are, and he appreciated that, and also he's working toward a math PhD in the United States. Oh my goodness, no, all my respect. So okay, Lolo, do you know the hierarchy of PhDs? Like the
No, definitely not.
so
Is
yeah,
gender studies number one?
so math is sort of top of the ladder. Math
Oh.
PhD basically just looks down upon every other major there is. And second, you have physics PhD, and the physics PhDs are looked down upon the chemistries, the biology major, the neuroscience, the economist, and so economists are sort of like, oh, we're top of the social science, but the natural science the natural sciences laugh at us, and below economists there are the political scientists, the sociologists, the education major, and below all them there's like the English major, the history major. Well, I won't go down. It gets worse, but the point is, math is sort of the pearl on the crown, the top of the ladder. So good for you. But it's also
Isn't that interesting? Because I guess math is probably the center of it, right?
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's physics is built on math, chemistry is built on physics, biology is built on chemistry, social sciences are built on biology. I don't know.
Right.
There's like a tower there.
The joke among economists is like we just eat the physics, the leftover from the mathematicians. So they had this beautiful theorem that was devised in the 50s, and we grab the theorem, put on a sort of a economic wrapper around it, and use it as an economic model, which was the case with Nash's original model. That was, the original Nash theorem had nothing to do with economics. It's nothing to do with game theory. It was a pure math problem, but we sort of grab the model, apply it to real world, situations, and call that an economic theorem. So, we are sort of just stealing from the mathematicians and the physicists of the world. So, yeah, you guys are way ahead of us. Good for you.
Nice. Very, very modest of you. So there was someone that asked another question there, and I just freaking missed it, and I'm really bummed. So if you just did a dashang, if you just did a monetary tip and we missed your question, I will pull it out and get it, and we'll answer it in the next episode. I promise you. Mm-hmm. Now, before we go, we have to talk about one more hot topic, which is this young vlogger in China, He was using China's YouTube, which is called Bilibili. And he had a small following, maybe of like 60,000 to 70,000, about the same that I have. Basically, he was a nobody. And no, but this kid, this story is about to not be funny at all. His corpse was found in one of the like rooms for rent type situations that you can find in many Chinese cities, which are really cheap, but also really miserable living conditions, if I'm remembering this correctly. And it was because he had diabetes, and he had a very sad story that people covered. That was his grandma got sick, his parents or his whole family went bankrupt trying to get her treatment. He had to go away from home when he was in like middle school, leave school, and start working trying to work to support himself. And, eventually the diabetes as a 21-year-old, I think, killed him. And in his meantime, he would make content, and he had developed a small following. And up until he died, there was like a bunch of posts that were describing, his body failing basically, and how sad and miserable he was, and just how much pain this guy was in. And it really has shocked the Chinese internet, because the only joy that he got in life was interacting with his small audience online. And something like diabetes, you would hope that the second largest economy in the world would be able to help their citizens and be able to help them out with. Mm-hmm. It's a really sad story. And the thing I said, and I want to hear your opinion on this as well, but the thing I said was, you guys also got to understand this shit happens in America too, because of the poor insurance system here. Mm-hmm. Google it. Google kids that died from like trying to, uh, like spread their diabetes treatment, like insulin. They're trying to like spread it over a longer period of time. So they're taking less than the amount they should just because they can't afford for more treatment. And that eventually kills them. I mean, there's a lot of examples of it. The biggest difference in America, though, is when that happens, there's protests, people freak out. If you go Google this, you'll see news programs about it. People talk about it.
Yeah.
In China.
Yeah, so I completely agree. I mean, in China, it's always sort of one tragic story after another. You know, people weep over it. People are super sad about it. We expect something to happen. And after a short period of time, it's sort of a sadder story, a more tragical story happened, and people just forget about it. I mean, so the one case in point is vaccine. There has been like multiple vaccine scandals in the last 10 to 15 years. And it just keep happening. Like people, you know, when it happened, people felt really sad. People complain. We want to find the people who are responsible for this. But, you know, it strikes me as something more systematic and more deep rooted in the system. But no one seems to question the system itself. It's always, okay, so this thing happened. Let's just find the bad guy behind all this and punish him. But, just think about all the food poisoning incidents that happened in the past, I don't know, 10 years, right? There's baby formula. There's sort of fake meat. There's all kinds of just scary
fake vaccines.
But like, yeah, I feel like I call it like, it's almost like sort of suffering porn, you know, like sometimes it's, when you see something really tragical, you have this visceral feeling of being sad and being just completely revolted and just, you literally want to puke. But it's always, I hate to say this, but it's almost like a porn-like feeling when you see something really bloody showing on screen. I mean, you are feeling it and like you are concerned about it, but ultimately it's sort of like a movie. It's like something happening to someone else. It never occurred to you that it could be a much more systematic problem that needs to be dealt with from a society's point of view, or from a societal point of view. But, you know, it really saddens me because I think he will not be the only one. He's the one that became visible and famous on Chinese internet.
Right.
How many kids out there actually do not have decent access to healthcare? To food security, to clean water, and how many of what we call 农民工, so people who work in the city but do not have a legal residence in the city, which means they don't have access to healthcare. Their kids don't have access to legal education, and they don't have basic protection, even if they work on highly dangerous construction jobs. I mean, those are, when you see this really sad thing happen to this kid or to some construction worker, we feel sad for them, but ultimately it's just sort of one blip in the long memory of the Chinese society. And there are so many people, and we have so many shit to deal with in our own life. And this is something we weep over on day one. On day two, there's something else happening, and our attention was just grabbed away by this other headline. And on day three, something sort of popped up in our life that requires attention to our effort to deal with, and it's just one thing after another. But like, I don't know, there's just never this sort of systematic. There's I feel like, I don't know, we are a country that forgets too fast and too soon, and there's never this this sense of introspection and retrospection, looking back and looking inside to see what the root of the problem is. And everyone is
because you can't. That's, it goes back to making good art, right? You don't necessarily, not all art has to do with politics, but politics of the time will influence art of that time. It just will. And if you try and make something, like I always bring up, I think it's in English, I think it's called Mr. Six, which is Lao Par, this Beijing movie, which you would think would be like The Departed. It would be like The Departed, where they kind of explore the underbelly of Beijing, and especially this generation of people, mostly men, but that are just kind of like not, they work in between the law. You know, they go right underneath it and they do a lot of mischievous things to make money, to make ends meet. And if you go see that movie, you know, a lot of Chinese people, when it came out in, I think 2015 or 2016, they were like, you got to see this movie. LeLe, it's such a good movie. It's an incredible film. And you go see it. The movie is bad.
Yeah,
It's a bad film. And the only time that you see this like old person fall down and nobody helps them up, which comes from this phenomenon in China, where if someone, not only old people, but fall, a lot of people don't want to pick them up because there's been enough times where the person is faking and they say the person helping them up was the one that pushed them. And then the person that originally wanted to help them now has to pay. Right? Because the police sometimes are just like, well, I don't want to fucking deal with this. Yeah, it's your fault. They're right. You got to pay them. And because a scene like that in the movie isn't going to, it's in Chinese, they call liu bai, which is like leave a white space. It's very popular in Chinese paintings. And it's the film cannot analyze an issue like that or bring it out through its artistic expression in any depth. Because if you do explore it too deeply, it comes back to the government. And that's why you'll see a lot of phenomenons in China, like this kid, but also the woman that died at Pinduoduo, and then the person at Pinduoduo that also killed themselves recently. You just see things like this, and it will never actually get fixed, and because people's attention is just constantly being pulled from them. And you could argue the same thing happens outside the Great Firewall. At least outside the Great Firewall, you have the opportunity to talk about it. Right. You know, you can be aware of it.
Right. That's a key difference. Yeah, that's a key difference.
It's crazy. It's crazy. What do you do? I mean, to try and just say that the Great Firewall, as long as we take that down and there's a flow of influx of information fills the minds of 1 billion Chinese people, that like we're not ready for it. I mean, it would be chaotic and it would be scary. So the question of how do we go about the future with China, its citizens, its internet, and the world is a really complex question. And we can definitely hit on that in another episode. Yeah. But I think that's about it for this episode. Thank you very much, Lizzi, for joining us, especially at this late of an hour. We want to make sure you get to bed at a good time. What did you say?
Thank you guys for tuning in. And thank you, LeLe, for having me here. It's such a great time talking with you.
Yes, very much. Thank you so much, guys, for coming. And the Chinese episode we'll do another Chinese episode next Saturday.
Sure. Yeah.
All right.
Talking in Chinese. All right. Thank you.
Till next time, guys. See you later.
Bye.